The Vedic Age, 1500 BCE to 600 BCE. Until the discovery of Indus Valley Civilization, the Vedic period was considered to be the beginning of Indian history and civilization. In Indian history, the period 1500 BCE to 600 BCE is called the Vedic Age, as most of the information about this period is derived from Vedic literature. Vedic literature was composed in Sanskrit language, which, in Vedic times, was quite different from the Sanskrit that we are familiar with. Surprisingly, our past was revealed to us by a few European scholars like Max Muller and William Jones, who were greatly influenced by the richness of Sanskrit language and literature. These scholars found many common words of Sanskrit and European languages and concluded that in the past, the Indians and Europeans shared a common homeland, probably in Central Asia. They also concluded that Sanskrit belonged to Indo-European group of languages. Most of the languages spoken in northern India have Sanskrit roots, whereas the South Indian languages belong to Dravidian group. There are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sam Veda, and Atharva Veda. The word Veda is derived from the word Vid, which means to know. The oldest Veda is the Rig Veda, composed around 1500 BCE. It includes more than 1,000 hymns called Sukta, that is, well said. These hymns are in praise of various gods and goddesses. Agni, Indra, and Soma have been praised differently. Different sages or rishis had composed them and taught them to the people. The Vedic text is divided in 2 orders: early and later Vedic literature. The early Vedic literature includes the 4 Vedas, the Brahmans, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads, 1500 to 1000 BCE, and later Vedic literature consists of the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata, 1000 to 600 BCE. Early Vedic period. Aryans, meaning noble, were a semi-nomadic tribe who probably came from Central Asia over a long period of time. They lived with the existing people. There was, as a result, a mixing of languages and ways of life after the decline of Indus Valley civilization. Thus, Vedic culture came up slowly, which is reflected in Vedas. Initially, the Rig Veda was not in written form but was passed on orally. Knowledge passed on in this way was known as Shruti. The Vedic teachers took great care to teach students to pronounce words and memorize hymns correctly. At the time of Aryan entry into India, Indus Valley cities gave a deserted look to inhabitants and migrants. This would seem to confirm the archaeological evidence that the cities were destroyed and not occupied by the newcomer Aryans. They regarded the cities as places of evil and avoided them. But the Aryans did destroy a number of Indus Valley cities. The Aryans had given up their nomadic habit and lived in fixed dwelling houses which were made of wood and bamboo. Within these homes, the Aryans developed a healthy family life. Trivia: the Saraswati River is one of the chief Rigvedic rivers mentioned in the ancient Hindu texts. The Nadi Stuti hymn in the Rig Veda 10.75 mentions the Saraswati between the Yamuna in the east and Satluj in the west. And later Vedic texts like Tandya and Jaiminya Brahmans, as well as the Mahabharata, mention that the Saraswati dried up in a desert. The goddess Saraswati was originally a personification of this river, but later developed an independent identity and meaning. Geographical extent of early Aryan settlements. The Vedic hymns reveal the initial settlements in India. Western tributaries of Indus, the Gomti, modern Gomal, the Krumu, modern Kurram, and Kuba, modern Kabul. The one river mentioned in the north of Kabul is Suvestu, modern Swat. But the main focus of the Rig Veda settlements is the Punjab and Delhi, that is, the regions between the most frequently mentioned rivers Sindhu, Indus, the Saraswati, dried up, the Drasdwati, modern Chautung River, the 5 rivers of Punjab, and Yamuna. The later Vedic literature shows that the Aryans knew the 2 seas, the Himalayas, the Vindhyan mountains, and generally the entire Indo-Gangetic plain. Besides geographical location, it also gives us information about social, political, economic, and religious life of those people who lived during the Rig Vedic age. Rig Veda speaks of the famous tribe Bharata and its wars against other tribes. Bharata played an important role and was in majority. Hence, the country Bharat has been named after it. Political life. The Aryans lived in several tribes called Janas. A group of families formed a clan or Vish, and several Vish together formed a Jana. Generally, the tribes lived in villages called Grama. It is probable that the Aryans, with their superior language and technology of weaponry, had imposed their own style of culture on the earlier settlers. The Vedas mention Dasas, who were non-Aryan tribes. The tribal chief of Bharata was called Rajan. He led his people during war and protected them in times of peace. The Sabha assembly of noble elders, military head and chief priest, Purohit, advised and assisted Rajan. He was responsible for maintaining law and order and to lead his tribe to victory. The people gave voluntary donation of Bali, tax, to the Rajan for the services rendered by him. Social life. People lived in a small unit called Kula, which were associated with the schools of Vedic rishis. Eldest male member was called Grihapati, whose decisions were binding on all and were strictly followed. Women were educated and allowed to attend religious assemblies. Some of them have also contributed in the formation of Vedas. Veda means known knowledge. Women also looked after the children and household management. Society was divided into 4 main varnas, or type of occupations. Varna meant color of skin. Brahmans. Brahmans were those who looked after all religious matters. They also had ashrams to educate people. Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas were those who ruled and defended the kingdom, the warrior class of the society. Vaishyas. They were traders, cultivators, and artisans. Shudras or Dasas. They were generally native of India and their skin color was dark. They carried out the traditional work such as pottery making, metalwork, carpentry, etc. Marriage of boys and girls took place with the consent of parents. People presented gifts to a newly wed couple. Occupations. Aryans came as pastoral nomads, that is, they kept large herds of cattle, which was their means of livelihood. Gradually, they started agriculture and began to settle down permanently in villages. By the time of Satapatha Brahman, Aryans had begun to produce wheat, rice, barley, etc. The cow was central to their lives. It was also a unit of barter. Rig Veda mentions craftsmen such as carpenters, potters, chariot makers, weavers, leather and metal workers. Trading flourished through bartering. Religion. The Aryans were great worshippers of nature. They worshipped the forces of nature like Prithvi, earth, Agni, fire, Indra, rain, Vayu, wind, Surya, sun, Varun, water, etc. The Rigvedic Aryans did not worship idols. There were no rituals and sacrifices. They performed yagnas and chanted hymns in praise of their gods and sought their blessings. Amusements. People entertained themselves by participating in chariot racing, hunting, wrestling, and gambling. They enjoyed music, dance, and played flute, drum, and other musical instruments such as veena. 1000 BCE to 600 BCE. Three other Vedas appeared during this period such as Samved, musical hymns and their way of chanting. Yajurveda, it contains hymns describing the ways of sacrifices and rituals to be performed. Atharva Veda, it has got different kinds of hymns, chanting of which can cure diseases, dispel dangers, and some tantric rituals. Epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Epic means a long story in the form of a poem. The Vedic supplementaries and philosophical compositions, the Brahman, Aranyaka, and Upanishads were composed during this period. The Upanishads emphasized the need for understanding the true relationship between Atma and Paramatma or Brahma, the Supreme God. The events of Ramayana are related to Central India and that of South India. Mahabharata is the story about the great war between the tribes. The Mahabharata included the Bhagavad Gita, which contains the essence of Hindu philosophy, the Karma Yoga. Later Vedic period. Social life. Around 1000 BCE, at the beginning of the later Vedic period, the Aryans learnt the use of iron. This was the beginning of Iron Age in India. During this period, remarkable changes came over the Aryans in India. They gradually expanded towards the east and the south. They occupied the whole of northern India from the Himalayas to the Vindhyas. The region was named after Aryavrata, that is, the land of the Aryans. The spread of the Aryans over the whole of India was completed before 400 BCE, and this was possible due to a variety of causes including military conquest. The earlier inhabitants were either pushed back further or resigned themselves to the fate of the Shudras. The power of male head of the joint family increased considerably. The male ancestors, Pitra worship came into practice. The Brahmanas came to occupy a very high position in society due to increasingly rigid and complex emphasis on rituals and sacrifices. Though the women were treated well, yet they occupied a lower position and were considered to be inferior to men. They received their education at home. By the end of the later Vedic period, the caste system had become rigid and hereditary. New subcastes emerged as new occupations came into existence. The 4 stages of life. The Aryan man's life was divided into 4 stages called ashramas. These were brahmacharya, student life, grihastha, family life, vanaprastha, retirement to the forest to meditate, and sannyasa, complete retirement. Similarly, 4 purusharth were in practice, that is, artha, dharma, kama, and moksha. Political life. In later Vedic period, the king was the supreme commander of his army as well as chief justice of his kingdom. The kingdom grew larger, had a capital, and kings became more powerful. The sabhas and samitis lost their importance to assist in administration. Kings used to appoint ministers of their choice. They adopted titles like Samrat and Maharaja Adhiraja. They had regular army and performed yagnas or sacrifices like Rajasuya to gain more power and Ashwamedha to expand their kingdom. In Ashwamedha sacrifice, a horse was let loose to wander freely, though guarded by the king's soldiers. Whoever stopped it had to fight with the king's army. Later, the priests performed the complicated rituals including the sprinkling of sacred water on the king and declared supremacy over the other kings. They were now recognized as the king of Mahajanpadas. Education. The student life of a boy began with Upanayana, Sanskar or thread ceremony. Now he was known as Dvija, twice born. He went away to Gurukul, where he was educated by Guru, teacher, and lived away with the Guru's family and with other pupils or students of the Gurukul. The students served their teacher in return for the knowledge gained. The knowledge was passed on orally till it was written on bark or palm leaves. Trivia. The Gurukul system is an ancient Indian concept of education wherein the participants got knowledge by residing with their teachers as part of his family. The Guru, teacher, was a guide, father, and a role model. Traditionally, only the Gurukul system was followed in India. Gurukul system imparted tough training on the art of using weaponry, Vedas, music, art, and self-defense. Shantiniketan, an educational institution established by Rabindranath Tagore in West Bengal, is still run according to the Gurukul system. Religion. The early Vedic gods such as Indra, Varuna, Agni, Prithvi, etc. lost their importance. They were replaced by the trinity of gods, Brahma or Prajapati, the creator, Lord Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. Similarly, goddess Aditi and mother goddesses were replaced by Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Parvati, etc. Most of the Vedic gods became secondary or Upadevata. The religious worship and ceremony became complex and rigid. Sacrifice assumed great importance. Archaeological remains. The archaeologists have excavated a number of settlements such as Hastinapur, Kurukshetra, Kaushambi, and many sites associated with Mahabharata. They found the PGW, painted grey ware, dated around 1000 BCE. The ware belonged to a well-defined industry and had a superior quality of clay paste. The pottery was burned in such a way as to retain its clay color. It was not oxidized to give red color. The types presented are many bowls, cups, and dishes having a group of vertical, intersecting lines, rows of dots, etc. in black color. Some scholars gave these a cultural label as pottery of Mahabharata time and about 1000 BCE. The iron plough and other iron implements have been found. While the Vedic civilization flourished around 1500 to 600 BCE in North India, particularly in Sapta Sindhu and the Gangetic Valley, Chalcolithic settlements also existed in east and south of India. Microlithic stone implements have been found in Assam. The finds were blades, potteries, and remains of mud houses. South India also witnessed a Chalcolithic civilization with megalithic culture around the same time. Evidence suggests that it had sea connections with Central Asia or Mediterranean regions. The megalithic sites indicate that the iron implements and potteries were of an advanced stage.